Hey, welcome everybody. Mr. On Demand, man with the master plan. We're going to talk about some emulation, some PS3 emulation, as a matter of fact, and the fact that a viral PS3 emulator for Android has already vanished alongside its shady developer. Let's talk about what happened, why it happened, and what you can expect going forward in the future, and what my recommendations are to actually be help yourself do proper emulation. And we're going to talk about that right now. Let's go ahead and take a look at this article for a second. The viral PS3 emulator for Android has already vanished alongside its shady developer. Android hopes for PS3 emulation have been crushed once again. We're going to talk a lot about why the hopes for PS3 emulation keep getting crushed, and we're going to talk about what's going on here. So, the PS3 emulator has been removed from GitHub, possibly because of copyright or licensing issues. So that's an issue across the board with emulators. A lot of times, companies like Sony or Nintendo or other companies will sue or put a takedown notice to a developer to take down their project for emulators and so on. Not quite the issue here, though. That's not really what happened. We're going to talk about a little bit more exactly what happened. Uh, the developer's account seems to have been removed. And I mean, there could be some copyright issues. He could have more than likely he got some pressure from somebody, whether it was the Windows version of the PS3 emulator or whether it was Sony. Whether depending on who it was, I don't know. But we're going to talk a little more about that here in this article. Let's go ahead and say the sudden and somewhat expected move, the APS3E emulator, which had briefly stirred up excitement among Android gamers hoping to emulate PS3 titles on their devices, has disappeared from GitHub. Developed by a developer known as AENU, he's a Chinese person. The project may have been taken down after growing concerns over copyright issues. May have. Okay, particularly regarding its use of code from the open source RPCS3 PC emulator, and the GitHub pages for both the APS3E emulator and its creator's account now return 404 errors. Let's go ahead and talk a little more about that. I think there was probably a clash between this person and the Windows developer, and maybe code was taken from the Windows version. I don't know. I'm just guessing, or maybe there was some pressure from Nintendo. That's hard to say 100%. But what happens now? Um, so you know. The APS3E had quickly risen to fame in recent days for bringing working PS3 emulation to Android. However, red flags began to emerge when the developer, who identified themselves in vague terms as Chinese developer living in the countryside, started seeking donations in exchange for source code. So this guy was trying to do a money grab. He was trying to get donations and money. I don't know 100% for sure. I'm just stating what the article is kind of saying here. What was even more troubling was the claim that the project, despite being built on the open source RPCS3 emulator, was made closed source. And that's a no-no. If you're developing off of a open source project to make an emulator and then you make it closed source, that's not something you do. That's basically going against the original developers, what they wanted. I'll give you an idea what this means. What happens is a lot of developers put out apps or whatever, and they put them out open source because they want the project to live on. Maybe once they stop working on it, some other people can work on it. They can fork the project, make a new one, and under a new name, and continue to work on updating it. And that happens all the time with all kinds of apps across the board, is forks of apps through GitHub, etc. Now, in this particular situation, because they took an open source app and put it out closed source so nobody could fork it or copy it, that's kind of a no-no. So that could be part of the issue that happened here. So what's even more troubling was the claim that the project, despite being open source emulator, was made closed source. This is a clear violation of GitHub's General Public License, GPL, which states that any derivative software based on other open source work cannot be closed source. Now, this might be the reason, and probably is the reason why it was actually taken down. The guy was trying to, sell the code, the source code, and make money off of it. Meanwhile, the RPCS3 emulator for PS3 emulation on PC remains open source and freely available, under open source licensing. Forks of the project is allowed, but creating a closed source version based on the work is not okay, just like I said. Now, let's talk about why there's a working Windows one and there's not a real good working Android one, right? So even if you did have a good working Android one, which obviously there was one put out, what the issues with that is you have Vulkan, which is the graphics section that is needed. Only a small percentage of Android devices have Vulkan graphics capabilities. The Vulkan graphics capabilities, also, those devices that do have that capability are not nearly as powerful as Windows-based graphics cards that have the Vulkan capability. So when you start building in that capability into your app to run games, games on Android will not run as well, mainly because Android devices are lower wattage, lower powered, and they don't run as fast as a actual PC. And this is just common sense. You got more wattage, you got more power behind a processor. The processor has more cores. It's just more powerful. It's just stronger. And so phones are built to last a long time on battery, so they're built low wattage, and they're built to basically run your phone ecosystem along with portable Android devices. This is one of the reasons why I don't think an Android handheld is a great handheld device. They're just not that powerful, and they don't play as many things. For instance, there's a PS4 emulator out on PC that you're not going to see on Android anytime soon. Not to mention, games are written for x86 processors, which phones are ARM-based, so games are not written for those devices, which brings in a whole nother aspect of problems. The PS3 was a great console, right? It was HDMI, HD, terrific graphics, and so it needs quite a bit of power to run the games. I mean, to be honest with you, So, yeah, while the PS3e emulator has been removed from GitHub, users who have previously installed the APK should be able to use it, at least in theory. You can probably get the APK from torrents, or a variety of other underground websites might have that APK floating around. Some users are reporting that the emulator is unstable, with games either failing to launch or crashing unexpectedly. I would totally expect that, because when an emulator first comes out, it hasn't been tested on all the games. So games are going to continue to have problems. It'll work with a small percentage of games, and then that percentage will get larger over time as the emulator gets tweaked and fixed, and et cetera, et cetera. So, that wouldn't be that wouldn't be anything that is, I don't know, not surprising to me at all. Let's see. This person here in the article says, I've been tinkering with this thing for a few hours. I can't get any games to work. Got a couple of them to boot after a little while. They just crash unexpectedly. So turning my phone into a hot pocket and eating my battery. It's like I told you. Android devices are not powerful enough to run a lot of these games. A lot of the lower end games will run, but a lot of the higher end games will crash and have problems and run your phone hot if they open and run at all, because it needs a lot of power to run. This is the thing people need to understand. Your Android phone is not made to do this. It's not powerful enough. People think, oh no, look at the graphics. The phone does 1080p. It does 4K. No, it just records video in 4K. It does not have the GPU power capable of those type of things in most cases. So you have to have like some of the best Android devices out there. And some of the mini PC Android devices will be your best bet to be able to do this type of thing, because they run a little higher wattage. They're a little more powerful than your phone is in a lot of cases. That's not always the case, but you know, depending on the situation, you've got to look at everything being equal. Honestly, if you want to know my personal opinion, I wouldn't do any Android device for a handheld on any high-end emulation. If you want to run some really older, uh, older retro emulation, that's fine. It'll do that just fine. But if you want to run high-end AAA games, you need a different device. I mean, just period. A device that's made for it, because most of your games are written in x86. They're not written in ARM, which Android runs on ARM. x86 is what Windows runs on. It's what your PS3 runs on. It's what your Xbox runs on. It's what your Steam Deck runs on. It's what everything runs on, x86, and that's what all the games are written for. So get the device that's made for it. Don't get a device and try to make it do something it's not made to do. That's my point. Well, have to test and see what the state of the emulator is now, but our initial testing showed that it mostly worked out of the box, requiring some additional steps and workarounds. The abrupt disappearance of the emulator and developer from GitHub leaves the future of PS3 emulation uncertain as of today. Android users still have no official support for PS3 emulation, and RPCS3's developers choosing not to pursue an Android version due to toxic users and the proliferation of scams apps on the platform. That's what they say about it. So, when you got a lot of people like this so-called developer it looks like he was trying to scam. I'm not saying he was, but when it looks like that, he was asking for money, made it closed source so nobody could see the source code, and then wanted you to pay to get the source code. Kind of fishy. He probably didn't want the source code because maybe he copied it or ripped it off as well. And also it was against GitHub's policy. If you don't know what GitHub is owned by Microsoft, and GitHub is a place that is just a massive repository of places for developers to develop different apps and programs. Absolutely wonderful place. I use GitHub all the time for myself and my personal projects and so on. So hope you guys had a great day. You know what? Hit the comments up. Tell me what you think about this whole situation. Tell me about your experiences with emulation on Android, and what you think. And I know I'm going to get some Android fanboys maybe, coming out the woodwork on this. But the fact is, I do this for a living. 30-year expert. So I'm just going to tell you how it is. I'm going to tell you what these devices are not made for this. It's just that handheld gaming has become such a cash cow. Companies are putting them out anyway. And I mean, they'll play games. They just won't play the new up-to-date good titles. Go get a Legion Go, or go get an ROG Ally, or go get something made for it that's x86 if you want a real gaming handheld console that's going to do a good job with the majority of the titles. And even those won't necessarily play the newest titles real well, because you need a powerful gaming PC for that, or you need a good gaming console. So anyway, that's my end of my rant for today. You all have a great day, and I will see you in the next video.